Good morning. It's a pleasure to welcome all of you to the Herald and Review's Community Leaders Breakfast. I'm Chris Coates, the Central Illinois editor for the Herald and Review, the Pantograph, and the JGTC. Well, this is the 21st year of the Community Leaders Breakfast. This is our first time hosting a virtual event. Normally, this is when we would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and then bow our heads for the invocation. But as we all know, there is nothing normal about this year. And yet, as we report every day in our newspapers and on our websites, businesses, groups, and organizations are adapting. We are facing new challenges and coming up with many new solutions. And those solutions have been born out of necessity, but they have far-reaching implications beyond this crisis. And while the pandemic has turned the world on its head, there are some constants, some normalcy, like the upcoming elections. In my job, I get to speak to those running for office. Their leadership today matters more than ever. Your leadership matters today more than ever. That's why we are so excited to have Josh Whitman, the University of Illinois Athletic Director, as our speaker today. Even though we can't be together in person, Josh's message of leadership and vision have never been more timely. And thank you, Archer Daniels Midland. As we focus on leadership today, it is an honor to have a global leader in human and animal nutrition, as well as agriculture, be one of our sponsors. And now I would like to welcome another partner, Kara Demirjian-Huss, founder and president of DCC Marketing, to introduce our keynote speaker. Kara?
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here at the Community Leaders Breakfast. I'm Kara Demirjian-Huss, and it's an honor to be introducing Josh Whitman, a bold leader and a good friend. Josh is not only the 14th director of University of Illinois Athletics, but thankfully bleeds orange and blue in a house full of Boilermakers. Josh is a 2001 graduate of the University of Illinois, what's now Geese College of Business, with a Bronze Tablet Honors. Josh is also a 2008 graduate of the University of Illinois College of Law. There is no doubt that Illinois athletics has a rekindled fire in the hearts of fans around the U.S. and around the world because of Josh's leadership, "We will win" mantra, and his message of unity, collaboration, and bold action. And who can forget that 2019 season? One of the biggest turnarounds in the history of Illinois athletics, posting two big wins with Wisconsin and that incredible come-from-behind win against Michigan State, and our beloved Fighting Illini basketball team primed and ready for that Big Ten title, when in that final week we were canceled because of COVID-19. But with Josh, it goes so much deeper than those high-profile sports of football and basketball. His strategic look across all sports is one that has made the Illini strong. His view on great coaches, great facilities, equals a winning strategy. Most importantly, if you know Josh, you know his commitment and his dedication to our student athletes, something that I personally treasure. His work with these students on and off the field is unmatched. Josh Whitman has generated over $150 million in donated dollars to the athletic program, and several of the largest gifts in the history of Illinois athletics. We are so fortunate to have Josh Whitman at the helm of Illinois athletics. His success is a testament to who Josh really is. He's trusted, he's strategic, and most importantly, he's committed. Committed to our athletes, committed to our coaches and staff, committed to our community, to our fans, and to our donors. Committed to an inclusive culture, inside and out. I am so excited for Josh to share with each of you his views on building winning teams, leadership, and how to shift a culture and navigate through the times we're in today. It's my pleasure to introduce to you good friend and the director of Illinois Athletics, Josh Whitman. ILL!
Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you. I want to thank Kara for that wonderful introduction. She has become such an incredible friend. I really enjoy the time that I've had the privilege of spending with her and her husband, Mark, the Demersion family, brother Richard, his wife, Ann. Their families have just been remarkable friends to Illinois athletics and to the University of Illinois. They're very proud members of the Fighting Illini family, and their generosity has allowed us to truly transform the experience of hundreds of Illinois student athletes today and long into the future. And so I want to thank Kara and the entire Demersion Huss family for all their incredible support and generosity over these last years. It really does mean a great deal to us, and we're incredibly indebted to them. Also want to thank a number of our news partners, the Pantograph, the Herald and Review, the Journal-Gazette, Times Courier, for hosting this event. Again, appreciate the coverage that they provide to Illinois athletics and the great outlet that they provide to our fans all across the central part of the state, as well as thanks to the local sponsors who have helped to make this very special event possible. It's really a privilege for me to be able to join you all today and hopefully share a few thoughts. I've been asked to talk about leadership, which is one of my absolute favorite topics. I really feel like that is something that separates a lot of people in their chosen professions, and something that I've studied extensively. It's something that I really enjoy about the work that I have the opportunity to do at the University of Illinois. I'll tell you that I was a little bit about my background. I was raised in a family of educators. I grew up with two parents who were teachers. My mom was an elementary school librarian. My dad was a high school chemistry teacher and a coach. And so in a lot of ways, I was raised with a book in one hand and a ball in the other. And those two things, education and sports, have really formed the contours of my life. And nowhere, I think, are those things as evident as in leadership. It's one of my absolute favorite topics. I do think that it can be studied. I've certainly done my fair share of studying leadership, but truly it has to be practiced. And in my experience, that is the only way to continue to hone your skills, to refine yourself as a leader, is to do it. And I know from talking with our staff, from talking to colleagues who have been in positions of leadership, that is something that I think is a very common understanding as well. That said, I don't think that leadership has to come in a certain position. A lot of times you talk about organizational leadership, positional leadership. I'm a leader because I'm the athletic director. Lovie Smith is a leader because he's the head football coach. I think too often people assign those leadership positions based on title, and they give themselves permission not to be a leader because they don't have one of those titles. And I think that's an absolute fallacy. We all have to understand that we have an opportunity to be leaders in our own way. And a lot of it, I think, ultimately comes back to how you define leadership. And for me, leadership is really about influence. You're trying to influence people every day, the people who are around you, the people who work with you, your family members, your community. By being an effective leader, you are trying to influence the way they think. You're trying to influence the way they act. You're trying to influence the decisions they make. And that's a good thing. That's not meant to be surreptitious. It's not meant to try and you're trying to act undercover to change the way somebody perceives the world. You're simply trying to impart upon them a way of thinking. And ultimately, how you interact and how effective you are in your leadership role will determine how effective you are at accomplishing that. I think you have to ask yourself, if we all take the responsibility of being leaders, the first question you have to ask yourself is, what kind of leader do you want to be? I think to begin with, people know that you have to be sincere to yourself. We all are pretty good. We've got pretty high meters and can gauge when people are not genuine, sincere, authentic. And so you owe it to yourself, you owe it to the people around you, your family members, your coworkers, your colleagues, you have to be genuine. You have to be true to yourself as you try and determine who you want to be. I think that if people ask me, they say, what's the key to effective leadership? To me, it really boils down to a single word, a single concept, and that concept is trust. I think that leadership rises and falls with trust. And if you try and mold yourself into who you think somebody else wants you to be, they're going to see through that because they're going to know that's not who you are, and that's going to immediately destroy trust. And so you have to identify what is it that you believe, who are you, and if you're genuine and sincere to that value, then you're going to implicitly and immediately start to gain some level of trust. I'll tell you a quick story. And I talked about what kind of leader you want to be. When I was first a college athletic director, I was 32 years old. I was hired to be the athletic director at the University of Wisconsin Lacrosse. I'd never been in a position of organizational leadership before. I'm sitting here today, I'm not entirely sure why they hired me, but I think I fit some of the things that they were looking for at that moment in their history. And I remember early in my tenure there, we had a basketball coach who, like a lot of basketball coaches, had a lot of energy, a lot of passion for what he was doing. And I found myself in my office with him having a conversation that very quickly and somewhat unexpectedly became heated. And to be honest, sitting here today, I can't even remember what the subject matter was, what we were talking about. But I do remember that all of a sudden we were yelling at each other in my office across my desk. And after the exchange ended and he left my office, I remember sitting there thinking, that is not who I am. I'm not going to be that kind of a leader where I'm belittling people, where I'm screaming at people. That's not my personality, and that's not the kind of leader that I'm determined to be. As I was growing into the role as a young 32-year-old first-time athletic director, and so my rule, and something that I've really tried to live by in future interactions as an AD now at 3 different schools, I really believe that emotion has to be a tool. I always tell people you have to use emotion. You can't let emotion use you. You always have to be in control. And I tell coaches, I tell aspiring administrators, if you are always one way or another, you risk not being heard. And so if it's kind of like the boy who cried wolf, right? If you're one of those people who's always up here, then eventually the message starts to get tuned out. If you're someone who's always down here, the same thing can happen. If you're always even, if you're always calm, then you risk not being heard as well. I think there's really a lot of power in variation. There's a lot of power in using emotion. And so for me, I want people around me to know that when I elevate, I'm doing it for a reason, and they're going to pay attention because I don't do it very much. But when I do, it's because I'm trying to drive home a point. It's because I'm trying to get attention. It's because I'm trying to make sure that they're listening and understanding the message that I'm trying to convey, and vice versa. I think that sometimes it's really effective to be counter to what you think the environment suggests. And so I take a lot of pride in being the calm at the center of the storm. The thing that I've come to realize, and many of you who are in positions of leadership probably feel this way as well, everything you do is being watched. Everything you do by the people around you is being analyzed, engaged, and they're using your reaction, they're using your emotion to determine for themselves how they should react, how they should feel. And so recognizing that if we are in the middle of a crisis, if we are in the middle of chaos, which in college athletics, we often are, some small crises, some big crises, some small chaos, some big chaos, but generally the order of the day is challenge. And people are always going to look to me to see how I react in those environments. And I want them to see me being calm. I want them to see me being in control. Because if the storm is raging at its absolute apex, and they can look to me and feel confidence, feel calmness, then they're going to feel confident. They're going to feel calm. Good work never happens under duress, right? Good work never happens when people are so stressed that they can't function properly. And so a big role, I think, of an effective leader is to try and take the pressure out of those situations. Take that onto yourself, internalize that in a way that allows other people to operate effectively, to lead effectively, to do their jobs to the best of their ability without feeling encumbered by the stress of the situation. Now, I talk about building trust. Another thing that in using emotion, I think another thing that's been very helpful to me, and I think others would agree to this in their experiences, has been don't be afraid to make yourself vulnerable. We talked about the times where you have to go up and raise your level to prove a point or to gain attention. Sometimes in a particular environment, you have to admit when you've made a mistake. You have to admit when you don't know something. Because going back to the very beginning, people are very attuned to what's genuine. They understand where sincerity starts and stops. And they will know if you try and fake it till you make it, as the saying goes, they're going to pick up on that sooner than you probably realize. And so I've found it to be very powerful to acknowledge my own shortcomings, to identify when I don't have the answer, not to be afraid to show emotion when circumstances suggest that that is appropriate. And I think that helps connect to people on a very personal level, because you can't be a robot. I say you want to control your emotions, but you have to have emotions. There's a difference between controlling your emotions and being emotionless. And I think that being effective as a leader is understanding the really strong distinction between those two concepts, and being willing to allow people to see you at a low moment, knowing that that can help bring people closer together. It can help create that trust. It can help make people feel comfortable when they don't know answers, when they're scared, when they feel like they've made mistakes, because they recognize that you, the quote unquote leader, has done the same thing. And you haven't shied away from acknowledging it when those moments come. And so I think that's another really important piece to the trust building that's necessary to become an effective leader. I mentioned that people are always watching the things that you do. They're watching you when you're on the clock. They're watching you when you're off the clock, especially in high profile positions like the one that I have the privilege of serving in. The other thing that comes with that is that a lot of times you're not going to realize the influence or the effect that you have on other people. So I'll give you a great example. When I was an undergraduate student here at the University of Illinois, I became friends with the athletic director at the time, a gentleman named Ron Gunther. Ron had been a longtime athletic director here, and it was when I was in college that I first identified being a college AD as my chosen career path. It's what I wanted to do. And so I went to great lengths to try and get to know Ron and befriend him and spend time with him. And when I left, when I graduated, I sat down with Ron towards the end of my undergraduate experience, and he told me, he said, when you're ready to come back to work, let me know, and we'll find something for you to do. Now, Ron, I didn't appreciate this at the time, but now having sat in the same chair, Ron interacted with dozens of people every day. And I'm guessing that he probably said that statement and then completely forgot about it. And 4 years later, after a brief, unsuccessful foray into the NFL, I came back to campus, and I reached out to Ron and I said, "Hey, you may not remember this conversation, but 4 years ago, you talked about potentially giving me a job in the athletic program, and if that offer's still there, I would love to take you up on it." And Ron, true to his word, gave me that opportunity. And so what could have been a very innocuous statement to him, 30 seconds out of a 1 hour conversation 4 years earlier, was something that had a life-changing impact on me. All of a sudden, I had the opportunity to work in the athletic program at the University of Illinois, which opened doors and allowed me to go to law school at the University of Illinois, which gave me great experience and ultimately put me in a position to be where I am today. And if he hadn't taken the time to make that offer, or if he hadn't remembered or followed through on that, my life's completely different. And so we never want to underestimate the opportunity that we have. There's a great TED Talks. It's a little bit old now, but I'd encourage all of you, if you haven't seen it, to go out and find it. I won't show it on here because sometimes the video over Zoom is a little disjointed, but it's by a gentleman named Drew Dudley. It's called Everyday Leadership. And he tells this great story about how he was a young administrator on a college campus, and it was move-in day. And he was out on the quad talking to students as they waited in line to get into the main auditorium for one of their orientation sessions. And he went up to this young woman who just walked on campus with her parents, and he had a bucket of lollipops. And he reached out and he gave this young lady a lollipop. He made a joke, he made her laugh, and told her welcome to campus. And then he introduced her to the young man who was behind her in line. And he moved on to the other people in line, continued to give out these lollipops. And 4 years later, he accepted a position in another institution, and he was packing up his office, getting ready to leave campus for the last time. And somebody knocked on his door, and he looks, and it's somebody he didn't recognize. And this woman walks in and she introduces herself and she says, "You probably don't remember me." And she told him the story about being the young lady standing in the line waiting to get into the orientation. And she said, "Look, I have to be honest." She said, "When you came up to me, I was figuring out how to tell my parents that I wanted to get in the car and go home. I was already desperately homesick. I'd decided that I'd made a mistake and that I was not ready to be enrolled at this university. And then you came up and had that brief interaction with me, and it made me feel so comfortable and so welcome that I never went through with having that conversation with my parents. And so thanks to you, I'm getting a degree from this university. I stayed here and have had the chance to get an education here. And by the way, the young man that you introduced me to, who was standing behind me in line, is now my fiance, and we're getting ready to be married here in a couple months." And she said, "I heard you were leaving, and I just had to come by and tell you that you changed my life." It's an unbelievable video. It's a great, great story. And he goes on to explain that he has zero memory of that interaction, that he'd interacted with so many students, not just on that day, but in every day since, that he does not remember meeting her for the first time, standing there with her parents, or introducing her to the person who was going to become her husband. And he's mad at himself because he says, "Boy, I had this great impact on this person and I don't even remember it." The point is, you have interactions with people every day that may be completely forgettable to you, but there is the chance that that interaction to that other person could be one of the most transformational experiences of their life. It's not unlike when I was playing football, there are 200 snaps in every football game. But the outcome of pretty much every game is decided by 5 to 10 plays. And you just never know when that ball is snapped, if that one play is going to be one of those 5 or 10 that decide the outcome of the game. It's the same thing as you interact with people. You have hundreds of interactions every day with other people. And you just never know when that one interaction to that other person is going to be the thing that changes their life forever. And he says in this video that, again, this gentleman's name is Drew Dudley. He says, as long as leadership is about something bigger than ourselves, we give ourselves a reason not to expect it. And I think that's a really powerful idea. If we say that leadership is up here and we're here, then we give ourselves permission not to be leaders. But again, it's all about the leadership that exists in all of us. And we have to recognize that we have that opportunity for influence. We have that opportunity for impact on every person we interact with. And 99% of our interactions may not have that moment, but for that 1%, for that chance where you convince that woman to stay on this campus and to eventually marry this young man, you change that person's life forever. And that is pretty powerful stuff. Now, on leadership, there are two other things that I like to talk about. One is what I call the leadership coin. And if you think of a coin, it has two sides. And I think that the first side is something that most leaders are pretty good at. It's called the empowerment side. So they think about empowerment. They think about, okay, if somebody does a good job, I'm going to celebrate their success. I'm going to give them more money. I'm going to acknowledge how good they did their work in front of their colleagues. I'm going to give them a pay raise. I'm going to give them more responsibility because they did such a good job on the last thing. Empowerment is something that comes readily to most of us. The thing that I think separates average leaders from truly exceptional leaders is the second side of the leadership coin, and that is accountability. It's the hard side. It's the differentiator when it comes to leadership, because the reality is that very few people, myself included, enjoy accountability, right? Nobody wants to have hard conversations with other people. Nobody wants to be critical. Nobody wants to sit someone down and tell them the things that they could do better. But what I have seen is that people who truly excel in leadership, they welcome those conversations. Doesn't mean that they look forward to them. Doesn't mean that they're even that great at them, but they don't shy away from them. They address them head on. They confront hard issues when it comes to performance. Because, and this gets back to trust, nothing destroys trust within an organization more than allowing mediocrity to continue. Because think about it, if you have somebody who is working their tail off and they're performing at this level, and you've got somebody else who's not working their tail off and they're performing at this level, then all you're signaling to all the people who are doing this is that this is okay. And that immediately is going to create a fracture within your culture. So you have to be, as a leader, I always say that as the athletic director, I'm the chief culture officer of the athletic program at the University of Illinois. I'm the one who has to identify what our culture is going to be, and I have to hold people accountable to that culture. You have to be more stubborn than they are. We tell that to our coaches about their student athletes all the time. If you're striving for a culture, you have to out-stubborn them. And it's the same thing when it comes to performance. If you have an employee who, for one reason or another, isn't accomplishing, if they're not performing, if they're not working hard enough, then sometimes it may take more than one conversation. It may take more than two conversations. But at some point, if your messages to them don't resonate, then you have to start asking harder questions of yourself about what you're prepared to do about that. And now the key to that, the key to having effective accountability conversations is all the groundwork that you lay in advance. It's making sure that you have built, here's that word again, trust, rapport with that person before it becomes time to talk to them about how they can improve. Because if the only time you ever sit down and have a conversation with them is when you tell them that they need to be better, that conversation is going to feel like a personal attack. It's going to feel like a criticism. And the point of the message is going to be entirely lost. They're going to shut down. But if you have spent time with that person in advance, you've built trust. They know you care about them as a person. You know about what they are, who they are. Then you're going to have a lot of opportunity to hold good ground with them and try and identify a mutual understanding of what the expectation is for performance, the expectation is for work ethic, and they understand that it's about getting your organization better. Because again, if you allow that to continue, all the people who are performing here, they lose incentive. And that, as the leader, you cannot allow that to be to be tolerated. Now, when you talk about accountability, the other thing I would mention is once you have information, let's say you determine you've had the first conversation, you've had the second conversation, all of a sudden you realize it's not going to change. If that means you have to make a change, you need to be prepared. You've got the information you need. You can't be influenced by emotion. You have to sit down, you have to do it. That's the job that you've signed up for as a leader. In some cases, you've been empowered with that responsibility. It's not one that anybody enjoys. It's not one that's fun, but it's necessary in order to maintain the culture that you're trying to create. You have to be more stubborn than they are. Last thing I'll mention, and then we'll pause and answer a couple questions, but think about leadership in this way. I generally think that leaders will be judged in two ways. Number one, do you get things done? And number two, do you make people feel good? I think those are the two things that people in leadership positions are evaluated on. Number one, do you get things done? That's ultimately what any organization wants. If you're leading a group of people, you want to accomplish something. You want to do something that matters. And you as a leader have to be the spearhead on that effort. If there's bureaucracy, if there's red tape, you have to be the one who's going to help cut through that. You are going to be judged on your performance. How much do you get done? And number two, you can't just be a bull in a china shop trying to get things done. You have to have tact. You have to have good relationship skills. You have to be able to approach these things with the appropriate decorum and sensitivity to whatever the situation presents. And so it's not just good enough to get things done. You have to make people feel good in the process. You have to make them feel good about following and being a part of your group, of being influenced by your leadership. Those are the two things. At the end of the day, as a leader, if you can lay your head on the pillow and you feel good, yes, I get things done, and two, I make people feel good, then you can feel pretty good about your status as a leader. But if one of those two things, you can also make people feel really good all day long, but if you're not getting things done, then you're not very effective. So it's hard to truly be an exceptional leader without being able to check both of those boxes at a very high level. Again, appreciate very much everybody spending some time with us this morning. Thanks again for the invitation, and I look forward to answering a couple questions.
Josh, thank you so much for your time today. Such a great message, and thank you for taking some time out to take some questions too. I'm Justin Kahn, Central Illinois Sports Editor for the Herald and Review, the Pantograph, and the JGTC. Josh, my first question for you today is, with football finally coming back, what have these last 7 months been like for you?
It feels like it's been 7 years. I think that we would all agree that COVID time is a little different, feels a little different than regular time. The biggest emotion that I have felt here during this COVID experience has been one of responsibility. I just feel a tremendous sense of responsibility for those people who are involved in our athletic program, for our 500 student athletes or 300 staff members. It really has been about prioritizing their health and their safety, but then also trying to identify ways that we can return to some degree of normalcy. I think we all, in our own respective lives, have things that we do, and we've all tried to identify a path to get back to doing what we do in the midst of a pandemic. And that has really been the entire focus of our effort here for the last 7 months. I'm so grateful to our staff. They have been unbelievable in terms of their flexibility, their creativity, their commitment, their dedication, their selflessness. It has been one of the most remarkable displays of teamwork that I've ever been fortunate enough to witness. And I think all of us recognize that in the face of tremendous tragedy, hundreds of thousands of lives lost as a result of this virus, there have been some silver linings. And for us, one of them has been, ironically, that the fact that our staff has grown closer together while staying apart. And it's been an absolute privilege for me to be in a position with them. I will say, hearkening back to the subject matter of the day, this has been by far the greatest test of me as a leader that I've ever experienced, and I think very likely will ever experience. It has uh, been a chance to really evaluate what our values are, to really focus on the trust questions, to be able to communicate and all the different things that go into building trust, communication, transparency, accountability, which we talked about. All those factors have been brought to bear during this experience. And I just could not be prouder to be associated with this university, with the innovation that we've shown and the testing protocol we've been able to develop, to be associated with this athletic program, with the incredible people that we have here who, again, are committed to doing things the right way and doing them for each other. Um, it's been an absolute inspiration for me to be a part of everything happening here. And I'm just really looking forward to resuming competition and watching our student athletes do what they do, which is go out and compete at the highest level on behalf of this great university. So it's been a challenge, but one that I think as time passes, we will look back on as really a moment where we learned a lot about one another and ultimately came closer together.
You referenced sports coming back. What kind of sense of normalcy does that bring, if any?
It really goes back to the saying, absence makes the heart grow fonder. And for me, certainly, not having sports as a part of my daily life, whether it was Illini sports, professional sports, has been an unbelievably large void. And I think many other people feel the same way. Sports has always been an escape for so many. It's something that allows us to create sense of community, a sense of belonging, a sense of pride. It gives us something to hope and dream about. It gives us something to celebrate, to agonize over. I really think people enjoy emotion, right? We love the ups and downs that comes with life, and certainly sports provides a microcosm to witness and experience those emotions. And so I'm really excited for college athletics, and in particular for the Big Ten and the University of Illinois, to be able to do our part to give people something to rally around, something to identify with, some sense of normalcy, as you mentioned, that I think we're all desperately wanting in the midst of an incredibly challenging time. And so that's something that I think is really critical for us as a society, and really looking forward to being a part of that as we move forward here during the fall months.
Josh, your men's basketball team is getting a lot of national attention. You've seen the rebuild from the beginning. What are your thoughts on where the men's basketball team is right now?
I'm unbelievably excited about the future of our men's basketball program. They have taken some incredible steps here in recent years, and I give so much credit to Coach Underwood, the coaching staff he's been able to put together, and also to the young men on the team. Them having the foresight and the fortitude to join the University of Illinois and to want to be a part of the change. That's something that we talk to recruits about often, is that you can go to other programs that might be in a more advantageous competitive position at the current time. But if you do that, you might just be sort of the next person. Come to Illinois and be the person. Come to Illinois and be a part of changing a program. And candidly, we want people who are excited by that challenge. We've been looking for people who get out of bed motivated by the idea of being a change agent, and being part of moving this athletic program forward, and in particular this basketball program. And so we've got a remarkable group of guys on this team, who some of whom have been through some battles here for a while now. And obviously with the return of Io and Kofi, I think that speaks volumes about the vision that they have for the basketball program, and certainly it matches with the vision that Coach Underwood has, that I have, and so it's certainly exciting. Any of us who have been around Illinois athletics for any length of time, remember the electricity that a strong basketball team brings to this Fighting Illini community, and it's been exciting for me, and I know for many, feel that energy back in the air. Certainly at the end of last year, to be in State Farm Center and to see the orange and blue and to hear the crowd and to be a part of those memorable games, it breaks my heart to know that we're not likely to have that anytime soon in State Farm Center, whether it's an empty building or only a partially filled building. But our hope is that our fans will certainly find a safe and healthy manner to continue to enjoy this program and really indulge themselves as we continue to navigate the virus with what promises to be a really exciting Fighting Illini basketball season. We're looking forward to this year very much, and again, just couldn't be prouder and happier for the people who have been working for years to make this possible, and for all of our fans who have stood with us from the beginning, and I know are every bit as energized as I am to see the Fighting Illini back at the top of the conference and in the national conversation.
Josh, thank you so much for your time today and your inspirational message.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you again for having me, and look forward to hopefully seeing everybody in our buildings as soon as we can do so in a healthy and responsible way. So thanks again, and go Illini.
And thanks again to our sponsors, Archer Daniels Midland and Kara Demirjian Huss of DCC Marketing. And of course, thank you for watching. We appreciate your support of local journalism. I look forward to seeing all of you in person at our next Community Leaders Breakfast.